I was a sophomore in college when this happened. Money was tight, so whenever I needed something, I usually bought it secondhand. One Saturday morning, I was driving through a neighborhood near campus when I saw a garage sale sign. Most of the stuff was junk, but on one of the tables was an old smartphone with a handwritten tag that said, $15, works fine. The phone looked decent enough, and I needed a backup device for recording videos and storing files, so I bought it without thinking much about it. The woman running the sale barely spoke to me. She took my money, handed me the phone, and that was that. When I got back to my apartment, I charged it, performed a factory reset, and set it up as my secondary phone. Everything seemed normal. For the next few weeks, I used it occasionally for classes and video recordings. I never noticed anything strange. Then one night, everything changed. I was transferring some files from the phone to my laptop when I found a folder I didn't recognize. I figured it was leftover data that somehow survived the reset. Inside were dozens of audio recordings. Most were labeled only with dates from nearly 2 years earlier. Curious, I clicked on the first one. A woman was speaking. Her voice sounded calm. At first, I assumed they were personal journal entries. She talked about work, errands, and random things that happened during her day. Nothing unusual. Then I listened to another, and another. The tone slowly changed. In one recording, she said, "That guy is outside again." There was a pause. Same car, same spot. I remember getting chills. The next recording was made a few days later. I saw him at the grocery store today. Maybe it was a coincidence. A nervous laugh followed. At least I hope it was. Over the next several recordings, the same man kept appearing. Outside her apartment, across the street from her workplace, at a gas station, near a coffee shop she regularly visited. Every entry sounded more frightened than the last. I couldn't stop listening. One recording stood out more than the others. Her breathing was shaky. "He's downstairs again." Silence. "I don't know why he's just sitting there." Another pause. "He's been parked outside for almost 4 hours." The recording ended. By that point, I felt uncomfortable enough that I considered deleting everything and moving on. Instead, I kept listening. The final recordings were difficult to hear. She sounded exhausted, paranoid, terrified. In one of the last entries, she whispered, "I think he knows which apartment is mine." The next recording was even worse. "I saw him in the hallway tonight." I felt my stomach drop when I heard that. There was only one recording left. The file was dated 3 days later. I clicked play. For several seconds, there was no talking, only faint background noise. Then the woman spoke, very quietly. "He's outside my door." A long silence followed. I could hear her breathing. Then a soft noise echoed through the recording. A knock. The woman froze. Another knock. Then another. The sound seemed strangely close, as if whoever was knocking was standing right beside the phone. The woman whispered, "I'm calling the police." The recording continued for another 15 seconds. Then it ended. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, nothing. I sat there staring at my screen. Something about it bothered me. The knocks. They sounded wrong. Almost muffled, like they weren't coming from outside her apartment. I imported the audio into editing software and increased the volume. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Then I heard it. A faint sound underneath the knocking. Footsteps. Inside the apartment. I replayed the final 20 seconds over and over. The footsteps were definitely there. Slow, careful, moving across the room. The woman never reacted to them. It was like she didn't hear them at all. Then I noticed something else. Right before the recording ended, another sound appeared. A door opening. Not the apartment door. Something closer. Much closer. The footsteps stopped. For a second, everything was silent. Then a man's voice whispered, "I know you're recording." The file cut off immediately afterward. I nearly threw my headphones across the room. I spent the next hour trying to convince myself I had misheard it. But every time I listened, the words were still there. The next day, I searched the woman's name. I found an old missing persons article. The photo matched the profile picture attached to the recordings. According to the article, she had disappeared 2 years earlier. No suspects were ever identified. No arrests were ever made. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A week later, I decided to track down the garage sale where I had bought the phone. I drove back to the neighborhood. The house wasn't there. At least, not the way I remembered it. The property was abandoned. The windows were boarded up. A neighbor mowing his lawn noticed me staring. I asked him if a woman had recently held a garage sale there. He looked confused. Then he told me nobody had lived in that house for years. I left immediately. I still have the phone. I never deleted the recordings, but I haven't listened to them again. Because every time I think about that final whisper, I remember one detail I wish I had never noticed. The man's voice didn't sound like it was speaking to the woman. It sounded like it was speaking directly into the microphone. I was 16 when this happened. Even now, years later, I still check the locks in my house before I go to bed. My mom worked overnight shifts at a hospital, so there were plenty of nights when it was just me and my dad at home. We had a pretty normal routine. He'd watch TV in the living room while I stayed upstairs playing video games or talking to friends online. One Friday night, everything started out exactly the same. My mom had already left for work around 9 p.m. My dad was downstairs watching some action movie, and I was in my room playing on my computer. I remember glancing at the clock at one point. 11:43 p.m. I had my headset on when my phone suddenly vibrated on my desk. I looked down. The caller ID said, "Dad." I frowned. That didn't make any sense. He was downstairs. I could literally hear the TV through the floor. At first, I assumed he accidentally called me somehow. Maybe he sat on his phone or pressed something by mistake. I answered. "Hello?" For a moment, there was nothing, just static. Then I heard breathing. Heavy breathing. The kind that sounds like someone had been running. "Dad?" A few more seconds passed. Then I heard something that immediately made my stomach tighten. My dad was crying. Not loudly, just quiet, shaky breaths. The kind a person makes when they're trying not to panic. "Listen to me," he whispered. His voice sounded strained. "Don't come downstairs." I laughed. I honestly thought he was joking. "What?" "Don't come downstairs." His voice cracked. There was genuine fear in it, the kind I'd never heard from him before. I sat up in my chair. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Another pause. Then he said something that instantly made every hair on my body stand up. "I'm not in the house." I stared at my bedroom door. "What?" "I'm outside." My dad sounded like he was struggling to keep his voice steady. "I'm hiding behind the Johnsons' shed." The Johnsons were our neighbors. They lived 2 houses down. "Dad, stop screwing around." "I'm not joking." Then he said something I'll never forget. "Someone is inside the house." I felt my chest tighten. I was about to tell him this wasn't funny when I heard something through the phone. The television. The same television I could hear downstairs. The same movie. The same dialogue. I froze. The sound was coming through the call. My dad continued speaking. I went outside to take the trash out. His voice was barely above a whisper. When I came back, I looked through the front window. I didn't say anything. I thought I saw you standing inside. A knot formed in my stomach. But it wasn't you. I remember gripping my phone so tightly that my hand hurt. What do you mean? The silence that followed felt endless. Then he answered. It was wearing your clothes. I couldn't speak. It had your hoodie on. I felt cold all over. The gray one you wear all the time. My mouth had gone dry. I thought it was you until it turned around. My dad stopped talking for a second. When he spoke again, his voice sounded broken. It wasn't you. The room suddenly felt smaller. Dad. I ran before it could see me. I heard movement in the background, leaves crunching beneath his shoes. I called 911. I looked toward my bedroom window. Everything outside was dark. Stay where you are, he said. Lock your door and don't make any noise. I stood up immediately. The problem was that my bedroom door wasn't locked. I had never bothered locking it before. As I walked toward it, something happened that nearly made me drop my phone. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, right outside my room. I froze. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was upstairs. I slowly backed away from the door. Dad. My voice came out as a whisper. What? I hear something. His breathing stopped. Where? The hallway. I could hear panic entering his voice. Lock the door. Another creak. Closer this time. I looked at the gap beneath my bedroom door. Nothing. Just darkness. Then another slow step. The sound of weight shifting across old wood. Someone was walking toward my room. Very slowly, as if they already knew where I was. Lock the door now! My dad practically screamed it. I lunged forward. My hands were shaking so badly I almost missed the lock. The second it clicked, I heard movement outside. Fast movement. Like whoever was in the hallway suddenly rushed toward the door. The handle turned immediately. My heart nearly stopped. The door shook once, then stopped. I stumbled backward. The handle moved again. Slowly, carefully. The person on the other side wasn't trying to force their way in. They were testing it, checking whether it was locked. I held my breath. The handle stopped moving. Everything went silent. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I felt tears forming in my eyes. The person outside wasn't saying anything. No threats. No yelling. Nothing. Just standing there. Waiting. I looked at my phone. My dad was still on the line. Neither of us spoke. Then I heard something else. A sound so faint I almost missed it. Breathing. Right outside the door. The person was standing inches away. Listening. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. It felt like an hour. Eventually the breathing disappeared. Then came footsteps, slowly moving away down the hallway. I finally managed to breathe again. A few minutes later, I heard sirens in the distance. My dad told me the police had arrived. Officers entered the house first. They searched every room, every closet, the attic, the basement, the garage, everything. When they finally came upstairs and opened my bedroom door, I almost collapsed from relief. My dad hugged me harder than he ever had before. The police spent another hour searching, but they found nobody. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. Whoever had been there was gone. At around 2 a.m., one of the officers called my dad into the laundry room. I followed behind. The officer was holding something in an evidence bag. A cheap prepaid cell phone. One of those disposable phones you can buy with cash. "What is that?" my dad asked. The officer looked confused. "It was hidden behind the dryer." My stomach dropped. Then the officer said something even stranger. "The phone was active." "What do you mean?" "It was in a call." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The officer looked at me, then at my father. "The call connected about 23 minutes ago." 23 minutes. Exactly when my dad had called me. None of us spoke. The officer handed the phone to another officer, who checked the screen. "What number was it calling?" my dad asked. The officer's expression changed. Slowly, almost nervously. "It wasn't calling anyone." "What?" The officer looked back at us. "The call log is empty." I didn't understand. Neither did my dad. The phone showed an active call that shouldn't have existed. No incoming number, no outgoing number. Nothing. The police took the phone for evidence. A few days later, they told us they couldn't recover anything useful from it. No fingerprints, no registered owner. Nothing. The case eventually went cold. No suspect was ever identified. No arrests were made. Everyone told me to move on, to forget about it. I tried. For years, I convinced myself that whatever happened that night was over. Then, 6 months later, I learned something the police never told us. One of the officers who searched the house was a family friend. He pulled my dad aside at a community event and quietly mentioned a detail that had been left out of the official report. A single muddy footprint had been found upstairs, right outside my bedroom door. The footprint didn't match mine. It didn't match my dad's, and it didn't match any of the responding officers. What bothered me most was where it was facing. Not toward the hallway, not toward the stairs, toward my bedroom. As if whoever left it had been standing there, watching my door, waiting for me to open it. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is completely quiet, I still think about one question. If my dad had never called me, would I have opened that door? I never believed those stories about people secretly living inside someone else's house. I thought they were exaggerated internet stories designed to get clicks. Then something happened that changed my mind completely. A few years ago, I moved back in with my mom after dropping out of college. I was dealing with some personal issues and needed time to get my life together. My mom lived alone in an older house she had owned for nearly 20 years, and at first, everything seemed normal. About a week after moving in, I started noticing strange things. The first thing was food disappearing. It wasn't a huge amount. A yogurt would be missing, a granola bar, half a loaf of bread, small things that were easy to overlook. My mom blamed me, I blamed her. Neither of us thought much about it. Then I started finding things in my room that didn't belong to me. A crumpled candy wrapper near my closet, an empty water bottle under my desk, a hair tie on the floor. I knew they weren't mine. My hair was short, and I lived alone in that room. When I mentioned it to my mom, she laughed and told me I was probably bringing things in without realizing it. Honestly, I started wondering if she was right. The house was old and made noises constantly. Pipes rattled, floorboards creaked, the air vents groaned at night. Still, there was one thing I couldn't explain. Almost every night, sometime after midnight, I would hear movement. Not loud movement, just faint sounds. A soft scrape, a creak, something shifting. The noises always seemed to come from somewhere inside the house, but whenever I got up to check, everything looked normal. After a while, I stopped investigating. I convinced myself it was the house settling. Then one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. My room was completely dark except for the glow of my phone charging on the nightstand. I wasn't sure what woke me at first. Then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady, directly beneath me. I froze. I held my breath and listened. There it was again. A long inhale, a slow exhale, coming from under my bed. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe it was air moving through a vent. Then I heard something slide across the floor, a sound that was unmistakably human. I didn't move. I didn't look. I just lay there staring at the ceiling while every worst-case scenario raced through my mind. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped. Eventually, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked underneath the bed. Nothing. No one. Just storage boxes and dust. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I noticed something strange. My bed wasn't touching the wall anymore. It had moved a few inches. I knew for a fact I hadn't moved it. At that point, I decided to buy a cheap security camera. I told myself I was doing it for peace of mind. Deep down, I think I already knew something was wrong. I set the camera on a bookshelf facing my room and left it recording overnight. The next day, I reviewed the footage. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Around 2:13 a.m., I saw myself sleeping peacefully in bed. Then, the video changed everything. A hand appeared from beneath the bed. I remember feeling physically sick when I saw it. At first, only the fingers were visible, then an arm, then another. A woman slowly crawled out from underneath my bed. I actually paused the footage because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was incredibly thin. Her hair hung over most of her face. She moved slowly, carefully, as if she had done this many times before. The woman stood beside my bed and stared at me. Not for a few seconds, for nearly 10 minutes. I watched the timestamp in disbelief. She never touched me. She never spoke. She just stood there watching me sleep. Then she quietly walked out of my room. I immediately called my mom. She thought I was joking until I showed her the video. I've never seen someone go pale so quickly. We called the police right away. Officers arrived within minutes and searched the house. At first, they couldn't find anything. Then one of them discovered a loose panel inside a hallway closet. Behind it was a narrow crawl space that connected to an unfinished section of the basement. The area wasn't visible from anywhere else in the house. The police found blankets, food containers, empty water bottles, clothing, and dozens of personal items. Someone had been living there. Not for a few days, for a long time. The woman was gone by the time the police searched the property. But the discovery that disturbed me most came later. One officer called us downstairs after finding a notebook hidden among the blankets. Most of the pages were filled with observations. Notes about my mom, notes about the house, notes about our schedules. Then I found the pages about me. There were dozens of them. Descriptions of what time I went to sleep, what games I played, what clothes I wore, conversations I had on the phone, things I had never told anyone. Whoever wrote those notes had been watching me constantly. Near the end of the notebook, the entries became more personal, almost obsessive. Then I reached the final page. It contained only 2 sentences. The first one read, "He almost heard me tonight." The second one was worse. "He looked under the bed." The date written beside it was the night before I installed the camera. The police never found the woman. No fingerprints matched anyone in the system. No neighbors recognized her. No one knew who she was or where she came from. My mom sold the house less than 3 months later. As for me, I still have a copy of that security footage. I've watched it exactly twice. Once when I first discovered it, and once during the police investigation. Because there's one detail I noticed the second time that I somehow missed the first. When the woman stepped out from under my bed, she didn't look confused. She didn't look scared. She didn't look like someone hiding. She looked completely comfortable, like she believed that room belonged to her, and I was the one who wasn't supposed to be there.